Hello guys and welcome to a new video that was long overdue. If you followed my Twitter or checked on my Discord, you already know that I moved to a new and bigger apartment and had quite some issues with my now ex-landlord. So I really couldn't put any time into making videos. But now everything is fine and I can finally get back to making videos. And because I planned and prepared this video for such a long time already, I decided to still finish it. I mean, I know you don't really care about it coming so late. In the end, it's still tons of suggestions for a fun time, right guys? Please don't hate me. So same disclaimer as every year. This is not a list from worst to best. All mentioned games are available on the L site and or on Steam and are finished. Patreon games are excluded from the list, and in the description you will find the according links to every mentioned game. And with that out of the way, and because we have a lot of stuff ahead of us, let's jump right into it. Have fun guys! Our first game is a regular guest in my top list, Bulma's Adventure 3. It's the third iteration of the series and is set in the Frieza arc of Dragon Ball Z. Once again you play as Bulma, who travels to Namek to find all the Dragon Balls and wish for a handsome boyfriend. But Bulma isn't necessarily the strongest character, so she gets into quite a lot of trouble. Mostly because of the well-known cast like Frieza, the Ginyu Force or Vegeta, who act more like psychopathic rapists than the characters you know and love. Calm down dude, what the fuck? At first I actually refused to play the game because I expected it to force me to learn rock paper scissors patterns all over again, after endlessly losing against every single enemy, as with the two prequels. But gladly, the dev decided to replace the fights with puzzle gameplay, which was so much more fun than before. It's not like you wouldn't be able to solve the puzzles with the last 2% of blood in your upper body half, but they were certainly less frustrating and made the game flow a lot better. The hentai scenes who regularly pop up are still as beautiful as ever. Most of them are well animated and their style gets as close to Akira Toriyama's art as possible. I'd argue that they even got a little bit better, even though there is barely any room left for improvement. The one thing the dev sadly didn't improve is the writing. I mean, the game still tells a story, but if it comes to dirty talk, every character's IQ drops down to a mentally challenged Indian guy on Facebook.
I wanna kiss your vagina for 2 hours, then put my 1-foot penis in your vagina.
Overall, the formula of Bulma's Adventure didn't really change. It's an hour of fun with beautiful art, decent puzzling, and often horrible dialogues set in the world of DBZ. And I think that's beautiful. If you know me, you know that I'm always a friend of new concepts in adult games, and that's why School of the Dead is in this list. School of the Dead, which was probably only named this way to avoid copyright strikes, is a typing game. Here you play as a girl that witnesses your typical zombie apocalypse and tries to escape it. Because of unknown reasons and due to the game being in Japanese, she quickly finds a gun and a bunch of grenades for protection. How convenient. Now it's her job to fight her way through 6 different locations and protect herself from JPEGs with 3 different zombies on it. The only way for you to help her fight the ominous JPEGs is to type the words that are displayed on every zombie. Sounds easy? Think again. While the game supports our alphabet, the words you have to type are in Japanese, which completely fucks up your muscle memory and thus adds a big layer of difficulty on top of it. I have to admit that I actually cheated to beat the last level, so if you're looking for a challenge, this is something for you. School of the Dead's hentai CG is probably the easiest to unlock. Not only doesn't it matter how good you play, because the CG occurs after failing a mission, it seems like it doesn't even matter when or where you die. The game features a total of 6 different scenes that can be unlocked by, well, just dying 6 times. I do give the devs some credit for putting quite some work into those scenes, and the art is really fucking good, but it's barely enough to fill the 60 minutes you'll spend on the game before finishing it. So yeah, quite a small game, probably a game that wouldn't be here if not for the lack of some really good fucking games in 2019, but if you like typing games or want to try them out, you can't really go wrong with this. A game I nearly skipped but in the end turned out to be quite good is Lala and the Dungeon. It's a side-scrolling /wave/fighter, if that's even an actual genre. Here you play as Lala, who decided to explore a mysterious dungeon to find something or someone. I have no idea. I mean, I could have downloaded the English version of the game that is already out, play it and tell you more about the story, but it's not like you or I would actually care about that. So let's move to the gameplay. You can walk, you can run, you can backdash, swing your sword, use a special move and block/counter enemy attacks. Most of the interface is self-explanatory, except that one number right there. This number single-handedly changes up the whole gameplay, because it determines how many times you can use your sword. If the number depletes to 0, you have to wait or successfully counter enemy attacks to be able to swing your sword again. And that is easier said than done. There are only 6 different enemies in total, but all of them have 2 to 3 different attacks that require your attention and reaction. Otherwise you'll see more hentai scenes than gameplay, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, since the animations are quite well made. Not drawn frame by frame, but still really nice. Each enemy has 2 to 3 different animations that occur depending on the attack performed by the enemy. The scenes you will only be able to see when playing the game properly are full screen animations that have a lot of detail put into them and thus make them even more enjoyable. Sadly, the game has one big weakness. It's repetitive as fuck. The game is only around 2 hours long, but be prepared to hear the same soundtrack throughout the whole freaking game, paired with the same background and often the same enemies stacked on top of each other to simulate difficulty. I mean, it's still a fun game I would recommend, but mostly for its gameplay, which could easily be extended to a 10-hour game. And obviously its animations. And for the guys who think, okay Chris, you showed us 3 games with 1 to 2 hours of gameplay. Where are the big games? I want to sink my teeth deep into something. So this is Melancholianna, and it's 30 minutes long. Melancholianna is a simple puzzle game where you play a small loli who wakes up in an abandoned house and tries to escape it. The gameplay is straightforward. Walk around and solve minor puzzles that seem to be made for 3-year-olds. But it's fine, because the game is less of a game and more of an amazing CG gallery if you fall for all the traps you will encounter. The animations are fluid as fuck, and they even made the come animations unlike 95% of all hentai devs. It feels kinda weird having such a small game here, but to me it had some kind of a calming effect. There is no time pressure, no tension, no reaction needed, it's just something you can play while turning off your brain and fully enjoying it. And by that I don't even mean masturbating. But I guess you could do that too. Next game. Okay, but now for real. Pricia Defense actually goes ways further than 1 hour of gameplay. It is a tower defense game made in RPG Maker, but also in Unity. And then it's RPG Maker again, and then Unity again. Here you play as Pricia, a sorceress who gets sent out to defend the North Fort from the enemy magician faction. There are probably some story parts I didn't get because I didn't read them, but it again doesn't really matter. So forth to the gameplay. The RPG Maker part of the game is mostly just walking around in your steadily expanding hub map, where you can talk to people and buy new weapons and equipment, pretty basic stuff. But the majority of the time you will spend in the Unity part of the game, and this is where things get interesting. The Unity part throws you from the top-down perspective straight into third person, where you have to set up traps and fight enemies in order to defend the blue crystal from attacking enemies. As with every tower defense game, enemies spawn in waves and are capable of taking different routes to reach your crystal. Gladly, you unlock all sorts of different traps throughout the game, like spikes, oil lakes, crates to block paths. There's also bombs and teleporters, but I didn't use them at all. But because only waiting for enemies to run into your traps would be kinda boring, you can also walk around and shoot the enemies, or those eye bats to regain mana for the next wave. That is, if you get behind the aiming system in this game. Because it's stupid as fuck. You have to hold right click in order to move your crosshair, and with it your whole camera, which sounds like the mechanics of every third person shooter, except the right clicking. But here, in case you didn't notice it yet, the crosshair is everywhere but not on the center of the screen, which makes shooting extremely confusing. And if that wasn't enough, the game doesn't have rapid fire. That means that you have to click around 3,482,973 times. And yes, that's an accurate calculation, in each level. Or just download an auto-clicker to avoid carpal tunnel syndrome.
Kyle! Dude, what's wrong? Carpal tunnel! Carpal tunnel!
I could talk more about the interesting level concepts and stuff, but let's not make this too long and go straight to the hentai. Scenes happen upon getting hit, animations themselves are better than most other 3D games, except Illusion, but sometimes they went a little overboard with the animations' expressions. And that's it. Actually a fun game, if you can deal with the shooting mechanics that is, Otherwise, better not touch it. Nightmare School Lost Girls is a game about a nightmare school and some lost girls. Once again you get to play the typical hentai MC who attends his new school for the first day, just to realize that he's the only guy between hundreds of possessed female students that only crave one thing: dick. And for some fucking incomprehensible reason he tries to escape that school. God, I wish one girl in high school would have wanted me so bad. Anyway, you try to chase down that blonde girl because she has the key to escape this paradise. So you walk around, explore all areas of the school and try not to be caught by the students in the hallway, the students in the lockers, or the students in the library. You don't have any options to fight back once you get caught, so your best bet is to sneak around or run if someone notices you. Occasionally you need to complete minigames, but they're always on the easier side. But I still recommend losing them from time to time, just to see what the game has in store for you. Throughout the game you will find different marked spots. Upon getting closer to them you get to see pixel CG that drains your HP but is also absolutely worth it. I'd say that it's even one of the best in 2019.
But wait! There's more!
In case you lose all your HP or make stupid choices like going in a filled classroom, you will be met with beautiful drawn CG that are 100% reverse scenes but still vary a lot in terms of fetishes. I don't exactly know who the artist is, but it reminded me a lot of the Tinkerbell games, which you should check out in case you don't know them because they're really fucking awesome. The game isn't challenging, it doesn't have an English translation and only lasts for around an hour, but that hour, my dudes, that is an hour of quality time. Panophobia is a horror/stealth game made by the developer team Blackstain, who is also responsible for Hospital of the Dead and the Infectious Mansion series. I didn't know what kind of phobia panophobia is, so I looked it up and it's basically just a more intense fear of everything according to Wikipedia. But it could also be the fear of pansexual people. Once again you play as a girl who wakes up in some weird place and tries not to die. I don't have a clue what the story is about, but this time it's not because of a missing translation and more about a cryptic way of storytelling in horror games in general. The gameplay consists mostly of slowly approaching what's right to you and finding ways to avoid whatever waits for you there, often with the help of different items or mechanics. The interesting part here is that the game barely gives you any information on how to approach different situations, and that I think is a good thing here. Trying out something and hoping for it to save your life is way more unnerving than being sure to do everything right at the given moment, even if it sometimes just ends up being trial and error. The enemy designs are pretty unique and sometimes actually terrifying. Combined with the music, I would say that it could actually get up your heart rate from time to time. The biggest difference between this game and any other horror game is that nobody gets brutally murdered, but something else. That something else is well animated and comparable to their previous games. I still wish they would have put more time into the cam animations, which didn't improve and still look like garbage though. Also, you should be aware that being into horror erotica is a requirement to enjoy those scenes. They aren't really gory or anything, but they feature some weird creatures. All in all, it's a fun horror experience that lasts for around an hour and a half. Feel free to find out if you like it, because it's certainly not for everyone, by just downloading the trial version on the store page. And that goes, by the way, for every game I show here. The next game on the list is Red here, Elena wants to squeeze, I think. It looks like basically any other Wolf RPG game, but actually it's a Wolf RPG game with twin stick shooter mechanics. Here you get to play as the red-haired Elena, who's responsible for the big
Ara Ara
energy of this game. Again, I don't have a clue about the story, which you already can tell by looking at the dialogues, but it didn't stop me from playing through the game without any real struggles. Your adventure starts in a small hut, and from there on you explore different towns and dungeons in order to defeat bosses and find new items that will help you advancing in the story. As for the controls, you can walk around, throw the weapon you equipped, use your equipped spells and dash. I recommend using a controller for the twin stick mechanic, but it still works properly with mouse and keyboard. Apart from the pretty average enemies you find everywhere on your journey, the bosses are actually challenging and force you to use all your given mechanics, especially the dash in order to win. The game isn't particularly hard because of the basically infinite potions you can buy for small money, but it also doesn't feel like you could just run through everything, so no complaints here. In the end, my biggest issue with the game is its missing translation that could spare you some trial and error, especially for the side quests that are not necessarily for the story progression, but for the additional loots you get to see. Those are, by the way, really enjoyable. Not only for the quality of the CG, but also for Elena, who is one of my favorite H-game protagonists in 2019. Unfortunately, she doesn't get too many opportunities to show off her skills in the around 7 hours of gameplay. I found 7 scenes, which equals 1 scene per hour of gameplay. Maybe I missed some of the side quests, or no, it's only 7 scenes. The little amount of scenes didn't bother me one bit, because I actually had fun playing the game, and I count that as a win. If you like that approach or not, you have to figure out for yourself. Oh, and one more tip. There's one ring that allows you to swim, and there's one to ignore those windmills. You still need to find them because I don't know where I got them from, but at least now you don't have to press every button on your keyboard because you think you missed some hidden gameplay mechanic. Sinisistar, whether it's a typo or art, is a 2D side-scrolling game that with its atmosphere reminded me a lot of last year's Blasphemous, a game I absolutely loved. Here you play as Leanna, who fights her way through 6 pretty unique and interesting levels. The only tools you have are a sword and a bow, but let's give it up to my boy Egoraptor to explain how the gameplay feels.
The idea was that most kids just kind of plow through a game. If you did that,
Sinisistar,
though, you got your balls rocked. Oh god! They planned everything around the path you would take if you just ran right through.
Sinisistar,
His level and enemy placement required you to stop and think for a second. Be careful and mind your surroundings. It made you take in the level design and quickly find an effective way to beat it. Or you could just die.
The enemy designs look like they came straight out of hell, and they all have different behavior that changes the way you need to approach them. And all that goes for the bosses as well. They look even creepier and they're even more interesting gameplay wise. While the controls are so basic, I love how the devs managed to make them as engaging as possible, fitting for a horror game like this. Once you die in Sinisistar, which will happen pretty frequently, there are a bunch of 8 scenes waiting for you to be seen. All of them feature animations in that minimalistic pixel art style that is really well made. And additionally to that, you can also see the real action on the character portrait on the left. Sadly it's not animated there, but good enough to enjoy it. I gotta say that Sinisistar was one of my top 5 games this year, and in my opinion, it could easily be an indie title on Steam that could sell copies in the 4-digit area. The only thing that's holding it back is the length, which is only around 1.5 hours. I actually wouldn't have minded if they recycled some of the enemy designs or backgrounds and made more levels out of it, but on the other hand, you can always be sure that each level is a new experience. I call this a must play, and you should at least try out the demo to see if you like it or not. Alright guys, this is a little bit of a premiere. I'm personally not the biggest fan of kinetic novels, but just this once I decided to put one on the list. Because I'm sure there are people out there that love those kinds of games. Love³ is a visual novel about a failing hentai manga artist who is at the edge of getting fired from his current job. The only thing that keeps him going is his airheaded assistant Akira, who reminded me a lot of Minori from Toradora. Fortunately, throughout the first hour of the game, he gets the chance to work with one of the best hentai manga artists out there, who happens to be his childhood friend and who likes tables a little bit too much. Oh, and let's not forget about her assistant, who is also pretty successful in the doujin industry, and obviously also one of his high school friends. Obviously, all of them are extremely hot and all of them love him, even though they never leave out a chance to remind him what a fucking loser he is. But if you're expecting this to be like Nagatoro or Takagi-chan, you're wrong here, just to get that out of the way. Anyway, MC's cat seems to be some kind of godly messenger who influences his life in such a way that MC ends up living with all 3 of the girls together. Oh, and he also takes away any kind of fucking decency from them. So now in between a little bit of emotional stuff, mostly revolving about how they met and how they grew over the years, MC bangs each of the girls several times in different situations and sometimes even all 3 at once, leaving you with a question why they made a faceless MC to identify to begin with. But credit where credit is due. The hentai scenes are amazing, some of them are even pretty well animated, and even the typical slideshows can definitely show off with their quality. I mean, I knew from the beginning that I would like it since it's been drawn by Ishike, who I'm quite a fan of. Overall, there could be a little bit more content, especially because the novel takes quite some time to get to the spicy stuff, but it would definitely not disappoint you. If there's one thing to criticize, it's the fact that they barely explore emotions like jealousy in a four-way relationship. Everyone's just fine with MC banging all of them without questioning it. All the potential jealousy gets displayed as rivalry and works more as a comedic relief than a serious topic, so if you expect this to be an emotional roller coaster, you'll be disappointed. But for what it is, a light-hearted and sometimes actually funny VN with great art pieces, it's pretty enjoyable, I gotta say. Runeseeker is pretty much an improved version of Red Hair Elena. It's also a twin-stick shooter/RPG that is best played with a controller, but there are some things that make it quite different nonetheless. But first of all, let's not talk about the story because the game is in Japanese and I begin to feel bad for skipping that part so many times throughout the video. I didn't read them, I would actually care about that. I don't have a clue what the story is about. I don't have a clue about the story, but I just can't help it. The only thing I know is that you play a female heroine who tries to break a curse that lets everyone go feral on her. And now let's talk about the gameplay. As I said, it's a twin-stick shooter, but unlike Red Hair Elena, you mostly fight with close-range weapons, which doesn't mean that you can't dash, shoot arrows and use spells. The gameplay is really fun, fighting feels super satisfying, enemies have lots of variety in them, and overall the gameplay reminds me of an improved 2D Zelda. Especially the bosses were to my liking since they require you to put some thought into your approach, although it's nothing groundbreaking. As in most hentai RPGs that feature fighting, dying will lead to most of the age scenes that consist of an animated character portrait and pixel art at the same time. The animations might be a little stiff at some parts, but since the art is so good, it didn't bother me one bit. Also, I couldn't imagine how much time it would take to do frame-by-frame animations for that much CG. Exclusive to the boss fights, they made animated full-screen CG with even more facial expressions and longer dialogue, in case someone cares about that. As I already said, Runeseeker is an improved version of a game I already have on my list, so why would you even play the other game? Well, there's one big issue with Runeseeker. Its gameplay and story is just more complex than Elena's, and that's why I didn't play through it. I mean, I tried for quite some time, but I really didn't have a clue on where to go next. So yeah, objectively it's the better game, but you need to ask yourself if you are willing to put the extra time in it to figure out all the mechanics, or if you wait for an English version that hopefully comes out someday. Spoiled Child was one of those games that immediately caught my eye when it came out. I'd classify it as a point-and-click dating sim where you play as the young boy Haru, who visits his aunt Miyuki and her two daughters Rei and Yui on his vacation. Until the end of the 30-day vacation, which is also the end of the game, it's your job to do as much perverted stuff with them as possible, at best without letting anyone else know. But because the game is a little bit confusing at the beginning and the machine translation only slightly helps, I'll spend the following minute on explaining everything to you. So let's start off with the interface. The pink bar under the character portrait fills up when you spend time with the according character. It's important to unlock age scenes, but it also reduces suspicion of the character. The blue bar is filled by helping a character. Helping in this case means completing a specific minigame. Depending on how well you performed, you'll raise it more or less. The white bar under your portrait stands for your arousement. Is that even a word? Upon getting to know the girls better, there will be several occasions that raise your arousement until you need to come. Preferably in one of the girls, but most of the time in your pants. Just like in real life. And probably the most interesting bar is the purple one, which stands for your memories. While having different interactions with the characters, your purple bar will fill up and be converted into points at the end of the day, that you can then invest in a pretty big skill tree that unlocks new practices, makes you more efficient in minigames and even allows you to go for threesomes, for example. But don't expect it to fill it easily. The interactions fill your bar quite fast, but only for the first time, so it's important to always look out for new scenarios and try out different things. It's not big of a deal though, since the game has so much stuff to do that I think it's impossible to unlock everything at the first run, because not only is there the home environment, but a whole city to explore with different quests, minigames and even other girls to interact with. Actually, it was a little bit too much for my taste, but it surely never gets boring. What caught my attention in the first place and made me put quite some time into figuring out this game were the screenshots of the CG. Spoiled Child features tons of pixel art animations. Some of them are more, some of them are less detailed, but all of them are beautiful. Occasionally you will also see some normal CG, but the pixel art is definitely my focus of attention here. So if you're not turned off by the fact that MC is basically a young teenager, you'll have a lot of fun with this game. Not only because of the CG, but also because of the rest. So go out and gather all the capsules for Capsule Man, gather all the fish for the mermaid, and beat this dude in the card flip game in order to expand your harem as much as possible until your vacation is over and you can go back to your normal school life. This just in, Spoiled Child will be released by Kagura Games for the Western market under the name Summer Memories. I'll link you the Steam page down in the description. Super Mamono Sisters is the perfect break after all those explanations. It's a pretty straightforward platformer where you play this dude and slay monster girls. And that's it. Even if I would understand Japanese, I'm sure I couldn't tell you a lot about the story because the game itself also doesn't really care about it. There is the Succubus and you need to stop her from doing whatever she's doing. Gameplay is straightforward. You can double jump and use your sword to kill the approaching monster girls. The game takes only around an hour to finish, but throughout that time you'll encounter lots and lots of different monster girls that all have different attack patterns and several bosses that are quite creative, although they never really get hard. Unlike you, if you get to see the great animations that occur when you get pinned down. I repeat myself here, I know, but they're really well made. Feature different animation stages and many different monster girls that all have their own and unique animations. And that's everything I can tell you about it. It's definitely worth the time for its animations and its simple but engaging gameplay. Sweet Dream Succubus is a short visual novel about a guy who gets haunted by a succubus. And I know that this sounds like a wet dream to all of you guys, and it is at first, I gotta admit. He dreams about a beautiful demon, he meets a sexy cosplayer, gets medical treatment by a way too revealing nurse, and so on. But things take an interesting turn when MC realizes that with every sexual encounter he loses more and more of his life power. So his only option is to find out who or what she is in order to stop her from literally sucking his life out. So you go to different locations and gather information about your encounters. You don't have a lot of options to look for clues, but it also doesn't feel like the game forces you through a narrow tunnel of interactions. Along your way you will also meet different people and explore new places, but every day ends the same way, with a succubus sitting on top of you. And as long as it lasts, I can't really complain. The CG is pure eye candy. No surprise, since the known artist Doxy is responsible for it. Although it's funny to see that he's able to draw women without massive cocks.
Futanari, it's hey.
The hour of gameplay is properly filled with a sexy succubus in different outfits and situations, but I would have loved to get stalked by her a little more. Apparently there is a way to actually escape from her, but I didn't want to look it up, but try again for myself. Sadly, I was too busy to give it another shot, but nonetheless, I can definitely recommend Sweet Succubus Dream. The writing is great, not too much, not too little. The CG is beautiful and everything around that, like the backgrounds, the screen effects and the GUI add up to one great hour of gameplay. The first time in the history of this channel, Illusion gave me a reason to feature one of their games, and I took the opportunity. iGirl is a survival game set on an abandoned island after a big catastrophe that wiped out nearly all of humanity. Gladly, you immediately find this girl that I totally did not edit in the character editor to look like a sexy secretary. And now it's your goal to survive and fill her stomach with food so you can fill her stomach with sperm. Anyway, the game offers a lot of things to do. As with every survival game, you basically start with nothing. But through gathering materials, you're able to craft stuff like a fishing rod to catch fish, or a pickaxe to mine different metals, and so on. Those materials then can be used to craft more things like a hut, a bed, a workbench, and even a dildo that you can place in different designated areas on the island. You don't have a lot of restrictions if it comes to mindlessly farming materials, but you need to make sure that your girl is fine in the meantime. And this is not always an easy task, since she isn't only hungry, but can also get illnesses, for example, if you don't take care of her body temperature. And she even needs something that is called affection. But it's probably the most important thing here, because if her affection is high enough, he'll let you get to know her a little bit better. Or in other words, beautiful 3D animations that have plenty of variety, change depending on her affection and even the current location. There's not really a lot to say about it. I mean, you all played an illusion game at some point. I think so at least. They're probably the most played hentai games out there, and mostly for their beautiful visuals. I'm personally not the biggest fan of having all those options to change positions because it disconnects me from the context of the scene, but I'm probably one of the few that actually gets bothered by it. But that wasn't the only thing that bothered me a little. My biggest issue is the game itself. It gets boring quite quickly. I mean, there might be some people out there who love to play a calming game after work that only requires time and no skill at all, but I would choose something like Stardew Valley over iGirl every day. And the other thing that really bothers me is the price tag. Something I usually don't talk about, but this is just ridiculous. iGirl is available for download for $76. Something I just can't get behind. Even if it's a niche product, this is not worth the price. I don't condone pirating, but just for this once, I will tell you to download it first, and if you really love it, you can buy it, but otherwise, just not for that price. Just to end up on a positive note here, because the game itself is worth being on that list, the character editor is absolutely great and the community already released different mods, for example an English translation and an uncensored patch, along with lots of new clothing and skin options. Alright guys, this section of the video is dedicated to Kagura Games, and that is not because they were sponsoring my last giveaway or I know them for such a long time or anything like that. It is because they just bring high quality games that otherwise wouldn't have been translated or uncensored to us weebs in the West. And maybe a little because the following games have similar core gameplay and I didn't want to talk about the same thing for the next 15 minutes, so let me give you a quick rundown of the games I played and enjoyed the most. Let's start with a game that is just another iteration in the series of cuckold games by Ara Ara. Girl needs to earn money, experiences increasingly explicit sexual harassment at work and gives into it as long as you decide not to bang her while playing her slender childhood boyfriend. The art is as always beautiful, even though I gotta admit that the formula slowly wears off for me. But that's mostly because I already played like 10 NTR games from Ara Ara. If you're new to the series, even if you don't like NTR, you will probably still have fun with it. 4 characters to play: a dumb blonde princess who needs to learn how to reign a country, her OP mate, a prostitute, and a nun I could barely tell apart from the prostitute. The gameplay goes as follows: play the princess, lose to the boss at the end of each level, play the maid to save the princess but instead also lose to see more hentai, then walk around in the city with all 4 characters to unlock different age scenes that can only be unlocked with a specific character. The game itself felt like it was built around the age scenes. I didn't really follow the story, but I enjoyed the age scenes a lot, mostly because the devs also made Kunoichi Tsubaki, which I already featured for its great art. Apostle is the result of a dev who played Persona and thought, this is pretty cool, but what if we added giant titties? You play as the chat version of Joker, who is one of the 12 apostles that can summon weapons that fit their personality, just like personas, to fight the evil Magna that occasionally come into the real world through the so-called tiers. But as in Persona, you will often just walk around during daytime, attending classes for example, do some questing and strengthen your bonds with the other female apostles to get to the fun stuff. I could fill a whole page with Persona references, but just let me get those out. This is Joji. This is N.
I am that.
And with that off my chest, I can tell you that Apostle probably has the best story and puts the biggest focus on challenging and really fun fights. Here you can really feel that it's not a game built around hentai, but hentai built around a fully functioning game that could stand by its own. Which doesn't mean that the hentai wouldn't be enjoyable. It's like Detective Conan, but the twist is not that MC is actually a super intelligent high schooler, it's something even less believable. He is actually a she. and she tries to follow the footsteps of her father, who's a famous detective. In the end, the game is another typical corruption RPG by Clymenia, but this time they went out of their way and put in so many different quests that can all be approached in different ways dependent on your skills, which makes it one of their most ambitious and best games yet. The hentai is also pretty great, especially but not exclusively if you're a fan of tomboys. Two other games I wanted to mention are Ideology in Friction and Branded Azel, but since both of these already got their dedicated review on my channel, I will just link you my full review in the description in case you didn't see them yet. Alright guys, we're coming to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed this extremely long video as much as me while making it. Did you find any other games that should have made it into the list? Feel free to tell me in the comments. I'm grateful for any token of appreciation like a nice comment, a like, or if you share the video with your degenerate friends. Also, feel free to subscribe for more hentai game related content in the future. So stay tuned for what's coming in the future, and hopefully we'll make 2020, which was off to a rough start, a great year. I wish you guys a nice weekend, thanks for watching, and see you on the next video. Bye!